Hey, good morning to you. It's Daybreak at iFiber One. I'm Jeff Slakey. Hope you're having a good start to your day here. I got another great guest in studio, 35th District Representative Drew MacEwen. Morning, Drew.
Good morning, Jeff. How are we today?
I am well, and
Good.
you?
I'm good,
Happy
thank you.
Holidays, Merry Christmas.
Yeah.
The session is coming up before you know it, getting ready to start, but we have already heard your name in the news a couple different times, so kind of want to talk about some of the things that you put forth. First, though, FCC voting right now on net neutrality. The governor yesterday says we're going to protect our citizens in the state here regarding net neutrality. What are your thoughts on this thing?
Well, we'll see what happens here today. I see both sides of this, and the governor has a tendency, I think, to get a little out in front of things. Mm-hmm. Does he know where the votes are on all of this? You know, because this isn't necessarily a Republican-Democrat issue. So I'm just going to see how they come out, and then we'll go from there. I'm not going to jump the gun on this. There's a lot of nuance to it that I want to see what their final ruling is, and we'll go from there.
I was surprised to even hear anything from him on it, in a sense, because I think portions of the way the FCC is wording this resolution, or however it shakes out, is that the states are unable to exert their states' rights or their local control over this issue.
Yeah, that interstate commerce clause will get you every time.
Yeah. That's right. Now the interstate internet, it really is across the country.
You know, but tied into that, different, but on a similar note, you know, one of the issues though that I would really like our state to address is we have some pretty stringent regulations and laws regarding how the auto industry advertises, and one of the issues that we have routinely is some unnamed dealers out of Idaho that bombard our airwaves. The way they advertise might be legal under Idaho law, but it's not under Washington law, and we're really kind of and so it's misleading to our consumers.
Sure,
I would love to see those types of things addressed, which I think are much more legitimate. The world has changed. I mean, you don't advertise in a newspaper nearly as much as you might have 20 years ago, and so this the internet and airwaves don't recognize state borders.
That makes a lot of sense because the folks in Spokane and Pullman and those areas, they get the Idaho media market.
Sure.
Similar to folks in Vancouver get the Portland media.
Right.
And those have some of the same, they have no tax and I'm sure very different deals that they have up here.
Right. Huh. But in this case, this is there's some dealers that actually buy ads in Western Washington.
Oh, specific.
Yeah. So I get the bleed that's going to happen on border areas. That you can't do much about that. But when you specifically are buying advertising that's going into, again, Western Washington, and it's totally in a non-conforming manner with Washington law, I've got a problem with that.
Sure. One of the first things that I want to talk about, one of the first things we heard from you as we move into the first session, is some work on this Atlantic salmon.
Yeah.
What a weird deal. I don't know if many people even realized there were these net pens of Atlantic salmon here in the Sound. It just...
Not until 700,000 of them swam away.
Yeah, exactly. So we started seeing them all over the place.
Yeah.
How do you have an idea of how this began? What was attractive to Atlantic fisher folk, and then what are we going to do to say, hey, you guys got plenty of water there? It's called the Atlantic Ocean.
Right. So the reason Atlantic salmon are farmed in these net pens is they grow faster, so you can take them to market faster, whereas Pacific salmon don't grow as quickly. And so it's really it's to satisfy consumer demand for salmon, and so that's why Atlantic salmon are farmed, and they actually get they're sourced from Iceland, and then brought here. And I'm not an expert on how you farm salmon, but the incubation process begins on land here, and then they're moved into these net pens. They're fed and then harvested, and the issue I've got with this, and what we saw with the collapse, so the pens collapsed, all the fish escape and swim off. I don't have a problem with doing that type of agriculture, but when we spend as a state millions upon millions of dollars and resources to try to sustain Pacific salmon, why on earth would we bring a non-native invasive species that's going to directly compete with our native runs? And and as we just in the proprietors, said, oh, they all, they don't know how to adapt and et cetera. And and they felt comfortable a month ago saying that, they're all dead and, or have been caught. Well, this past week, they were found 42 miles upstream in the Skagit River.
Yeah.
That's key. They're gonna. I don't believe that scientifically. I don't think they can cross over genetically and frankly breed with our natives. I don't think that can happen. There's some that say it can. I just don't think scientifically that's possible. But they do compete for the food source.
Yeah, exactly.
They do carry other disease. This particular batch, if you want to call it that, may not have that. But the risk for, again, when we have an endangered species here, to me, it's just not worth it. If they want to farm Pacific salmon, I'm fine with that. If you have an escape, at least it's it's a native run. So that's the issue. So myself and Representative Jim Walsh, we did a bill that it's an emergency legislation, so it would go into effect upon signature of the governor, and it would ban the farming of non-native non-native salmon.
We just put so much money and education and time and effort into talking about these Pacific salmon. And we just went through that old Elwha Dam a couple years back, and now they're coming back, and life finds a way. You always hear that phrase, and they say they're not going to.
Dr. Malcolm said that.
Exactly. I wasn't going to drop that in there.
I'm a Jurassic Park fan.
Okay, good. Well, life does find a way, and it is not out of my realm of imagination, like you said, found in the Skagit River a few years from now. I mean, this is going to be that 700,000 fish. That is a lot of fish. We're going to be feeling this and finding these fish for years.
I believe so, yes. Yep.
Any word from folks on the East Coast about this?
Farm them over there.
That's where
we've got this great thing called airplanes. Transport them on a Boeing aircraft, bring them over here, and take them to market if you need to.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We'll compete in the fish markets.
Yeah,
and not for space in the water.
Yep, and there's admittedly there's a ton of factors that go into what's causing issues with our Pacific salmon. Seals are one. We've got to figure out. But why add one more issue that we've got to potentially deal with? And so
we're against native plants. We don't like native plants being put into the areas. Those take over all sorts of things.
Thanks California for the Scotch broom.
Exactly. It's the things that we see here that have major impacts. All right, the other one that we came forth with last week or the week prior, bipartisan effort to shift the way, and I know we've talked about this for years since you've been in the House, a way to not go into special session so much, avoid the costs with that, and make the forecasts in line with the session. Tell me about that, the progress. What do you think?
Yes, we got a bipartisan coalition. It's a small group that we kept it small so we could actually get some things done. You can wordsmith these things to death.
Yeah.
So there's four of us. I'm a member from each caucus. So on the House side, I'm working with Representative Kildoff and a Democrat from from Pierce County, and her and I have dropped this bill along with another one. My bill does what it does is move the fiscal year to May 1st. This is going to be extremely painful for a lot of people within state government because we're changing the way we do business,
right.
and it would be a little bit of a shock to the system, but we've also could become so complacent with special sessions. The reason behind that and the theory behind that is if we move, it's the only date that really means a thing to the legislative process when it comes to budgeting is that our fiscal year.
Yeah. We
can't operate like the federal government with continuing resolutions, et cetera. We have to have a budget in place constitutionally and a balanced budget at that. And so by moving it from July 1st to May 1st, that forces us to get this done. In a long session, we typically will adjourn, depending on how the calendar is, sometime in mid-April. So this leaves very little room to sit there and play around, frankly.
Yeah.
On the military side of me says, if you can't lead, get out of the way. I'm critical of both parties. And actually, if you go back to 1951, we have only passed on time the regular operating budget 4 times. So this isn't a recent phenomenon. It seems like it because we're living in it, right?
Right.
But structurally, we're just not set up for success. And so the other part of this, though, is to Representative Kildoff's bill, and that is to limit the policy bills that can be done after a certain point within the session. And so it allows more session time to be devoted to the budget, which I completely agree with. And so I'm going to also be dropping another bill related to that. It's a little bit different, and I didn't want to confuse it, so we didn't do that yet. But I will be in January. And again, it's just 105 days, and I say this figuratively, but with a little bit of irony too. We spend 75 days debating paper and plastic. And who cares?
Right.
We got a $44 billion budget to get done, and we spend an inordinate amount of time on legislation. Frankly, that's just not going to make a lot of difference on some things. And this would help also prioritize important legislation over, frankly, some things that we spend, again, a little too much time on, I feel. And so we're sent there to get a job done. Let's get it done. The other alternative is let's go to a year-round legislature. And
Sure.
I don't want to see that. And I don't think many of the citizens want to see that.
No.
That would be more costly, and frankly, not a lot of good things happen when we're in session. So let's not open that door.
Let's get in, do the work, and get
Absolutely.
out. It sounds like some of these changes or fixes could have likely been how things worked, and over the years, we'll let you do this bill. Well, they got to do a bill, so now, we'll let you do this bill, and then we kind of slowly get out of control. Final thing before I let you out of here. Now, all three portions of the government in Democrat control after this past Senate race. That's kind of been how you've been accustomed to working in the House with very close numbers on the votes. What are the Republicans in the state this year looking for? How are they going to be able to push forth their agenda and their ideas when all three forms, with the governor there in all D's?
Well, from my point of view, we have a strong defense, and it's a short session. It's 60 days, and yes, with the Senate changing control, at the end of the day, on most fiscal matters, the vote dynamics haven't changed a whole lot. They really haven't. There's conservative members of the House Democrat caucus and of the Senate Democrat caucus that just do not have the appetite for some of the taxes that the base of their party would favor. And so and it's a short session, so it's tough to make major policy changes. I just don't see that happening. There may be some hearings that occur. You might have one chamber vote on something, but I'm hard pressed to see the path where we have major tax policy changes happen in this 60-day session. I think what you'll probably see that'll be different as opposed to the past 5 years is some of the social issues that the other side believes in will probably have more traction to go forward. But at the end of the day, the two main things that we really have to address here are the capital budget and the Hearst decision.
Yeah, what's going on with those?
We're working on that Hearst decision. And in order to get the capital budget done with the bonds to pay for it, you need 2/3 vote in both chambers. And again, so that even though the Senate has changed control, it hasn't changed that requirement, nor has it really changed the vote count. And so we're holding fast, we're being on the Republican side to on that bond because it's the only leverage we have. And I'm gonna defend that. We need to fix Hearst. We need to fix it permanently. Otherwise, areas like Mason County are not going to be able to. You're not going to be able to drill a well on your rural property. That is devastating to our rural way of life. And so we're going to hold that. And there's been negotiations going on. There was a little bit of some framework that came out yesterday from a hearing that I'm not thrilled with it. But I'll concede that for those on the other side of the issue, it was a major step for them coming closer to where we would like to be. And so I'm hopeful here as we're midway through December that we'll get closer to finding some common ground. And I think ultimately for those of us that represent rural areas, a Hearst fix would entail something that we can live with, would be something where a landowner would pay some type of mitigation fee up front. That would be in conjunction with getting the well permit. Am I thrilled about that? No, but to have water rights in perpetuity, I would do that. And then also they would create some mitigation funds to address where we do have stream flows in other parts of the state. And this the amount of water drawn out from private wells is less than 1% of the water consumption in the state. And so to pin this all on the rural Washington, when you can build high rises in Seattle that take enormous amounts of water every day and have no check on that, just to me is it's an unfair equation. So we're going to hold to that. That is our leverage in this session, is that bond vote. And our focus is really to get Hearst done, and I think we can get there. We're not there yet, but we're working it.
All right. Well, the session gets going pretty soon, and we'll look forward to talking with you as that goes on. We're out of time now, but 35th District Representative Drew MacEwen, always good to see you.
Likewise. Thank you, Jeff, and Merry Christmas.
Happy New Year, and we'll talk in the new year.